I was reading a magazine the other day. It was called Man's World. And I was like, wait, isn't that just World, the magazine? Because we live in a man's world. So you don't have to really be explicit about it and release a magazine. But I was reading that and I saw, and ironically enough, Man's World magazine had done a feature on women who are working in a man's world, in man industries.
That's definitely like a catchy clickbaity title that I've seen many a time on Facebook or Instagram or something.
Yeah, the first woman the woman in a man's world.
Yeah,
that's always a nice PR selling point.
Totally, it totally is. The media loves those kind of things. When I was growing up, I was definitely a little tomboy.
Is that right?
And I played every sport under the sun.
Oh, yeah?
I went from soccer practice to tennis practice to cross country, which is running practice. I played basketball. I raced skiing, cross country skiing. And I played lacrosse. I was all sports all of the time.
When did you go to school? What part of this is you studying in a classroom? That sounds amazing, though. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, I went to homeroom.
What is homeroom?
What is homeroom? Oh my gosh. So homeroom was
because that's my house, okay.
Homeroom was something that we had that was like the transition from the nest that is your actual home with your family into the school day. This was something that you had every day at the start of the day. It was like the buffer for everyone either being late or being frazzled or peeing their pants or whatever. You had this 30 minutes, which was where you sort of gathered and prepared for the day.
That's really cool. And then you just so you did your half an hour of gathering and preparing for the day and then 12 hours of sports.
30 minutes later, I was school and done.
Having said that, it's kind of cool that you played that much sports.
I did, and my favorite sport was this sport called lacrosse.
I'm not that angry with you. Why are you cross with me?
So lacrosse is this sport that is basically, it's a field the size of a football field, right? A soccer field. And then imagine, field hockey.
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine field hockey, but then instead of the stick being on the ground and the ball being on the ground, it's basically like a net, like a butterfly net in the air with a small round ball.
Listen,
and it's extremely aggressive.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's extremely aggressive. You it's you hip check people. It's where you would basically run into someone to destabilize them. And the other way you would get the ball out of the butterfly net is that you would slice in the air with this stick to hit the other person's stick, but you would oftentimes hit knuckles. And it's quite an intense sport. And now it is popular in high schools in the United States.
Lacrosse.
Yeah, lacrosse. So, but here's the thing. From all of these sports...
Yeah, America's the only country in the world that plays baseball and has a World Series. I don't even know how y'all do it. It's our world is us, okay? And these are the series.
Which is such a terrifically US-centric point of view. But one thing that I think has served me from playing all of these sports is... Now I work in this very male-dominated profession. So I do video production and film production and radio production.
Yeah.
Which is, women are definitely the minority. If you look at the roles behind the camera that are more, say, cinematographers and directors, I think globally it's less than 5% of us are women. But I think one thing that I learned from sports is, one, just feeling comfortable in my body, feeling comfortable in teams, feeling comfortable being sort of aggressive and even I feel uncomfortable saying the word aggressive because it sounds so unfeminine.
Yeah.
But basically being okay with occupying space and being in this mixed environment. And that's one thing that I've really gotten from sports.
That's pretty cool. And that has sort of, it's almost like a thing that has carried you through your life.
I am less conscious of my role as a woman there than I am just in the general atmosphere of life outside of my work. And then I'm technically like a woman in a man's world.
I never played any sports. And I think it's part of my personality, is my complete lack of hand-eye coordination. And also, I think, maybe it is responsible for who I am today, because I remember it's very embarrassing when you're like the last one picked for every sport. And or you're like constantly chafing. Like, I used to chafe in areas that no rubbing was happening. Like, I would be chafing on my face if I ran like faster than walking.
Well,
but when I was sitting, at the back there with like, the six of us who hadn't been picked for anything, we used to find ways to entertain ourselves quite substantially. And I remember, like gaining a lot of attention during that time, which is my currency, by the way, attention. I remember like we used to sit there and make fun of everybody who was on the field, even though they were doing so much better than us. I mean, because they were doing so much better than us. Just to make ourselves feel better. I would sit there and crack jokes. And so maybe, sports shaped me also. I mean, being on the field and off the field, it still shaped me.
One of the things that, when I think of myself as being, one of few women in my profession, it makes me really think about like what your experience must have been like, because you were one of the first female stand-up comedians here. What was that like?
I used to constantly be worried about what I was wearing. The pitch of my voice is something that I remember reading these comments on, I had done, like I'd posted my first video. And I remember reading these comments and they were all like, oh my God, I hate the sound of her voice. She laughs so irritatingly. And I was like, really? And you go look at like a man's stand-up videos, there are none of these comments. And so even if you don't use it in your head, even if you're not carrying it to stage in your head, people's gaze reminds you and people's reactions remind you.
They have the same thing as with radio reporters.
Is that right?
Yeah. So female radio reporters receive way more negative feedback on their voice and reporting.
Oh, wow.
Than men. I think it's a woman's voice is either like too quiet or too shrill, or there's vocal fry, or one of these accusations are circulated about women radio reporters.
In retrospect, I think the thing that hits me like a ton of bricks every time that someone says, "Oh, you were like the first one to do it," was that I was surrounded by an incredible amount of privilege. I feel like I've been born to the best people. Of course, everyone thinks they've been born to the best people. But I was born, my mom worked in entertainment. She is in production as well. And again, she was one of the first few in the country to do it, to work back, behind the camera in production.
What decade was this?
This was in the 80s. So this was in fact, when my mother, when she adopted me is when she started working.
Yeah.
And this was about 83. And so when I started doing stand-up, because stand-up, and there was no industry, there was no sort of precedent.
Sure.
And that can be very confusing for the average parent, where they're like, what path are you taking? Because there is no path.
Yeah.
Where are you going then?
Absolutely.
And so, and because stand-up is the kind of profession that takes place in the middle of the night, I mean, not middle, but like late enough in the night. So when you're coming back home, it becomes late, it's 11:30, it's 12 sometimes. And so I had a very understanding mother. Even the quality of masculinity attached to humor. That what are you going there and making people laugh? Dude, they're not laughing with you, they're laughing at you.
Yeah.
And that shame that comes. My dad was very like open to it. He was like, oh my God, you're getting laughs. That's delightful. And so they were both incredibly supportive of this attempt that I was making. They were the ones providing the late night taxi money for me to come back home for the first 3 years. And so I was very lucky, and maybe not as lucky as the men who are doing stand-up, but definitely much luckier than, I know millions of women out there. I just happened to be in the right place, right time, right economic strata, right social strata, which made me the first to be able to do this. And that's why I think actually the story of someone who comes first is always so fascinating. It's because you've sort of blazed a path into uncharted territory. And I think why it's so important to hear the stories of the women who are the first of their name in any field is because when they turn around, we want to see the path that they've blazed doesn't get covered up in grass again. That you blaze that path and then you set it down in stone and tar so that women that come after you, don't feel the same sense of loneliness, the same sense of struggle that you had. Or face the same discrimination and biases that you had. And so I think their stories, are incredibly important. Which is why we are very excited to have with us journalist and sports commentator Mayanti Langer on the Women in Labour podcast. Warm Women in Labour, welcome to Mayanti Langer!
Yay! Thank you for having me here. And 1,000 apologies before the show, you'll understand that later.
That could not be a better intro.
That could not be a better intro. In fact, one of the things when she was like, Mayanti Langer is coming. So I said, listen, Mayanti has been the only woman in a man's world for so long now. I am 100% sure there's a set of questions that she has been asked 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So what are the questions that you've been asked continuously?
I think that one is the first. How do you feel how do you feel to be a woman in a man's world? I think that's the most common one. But that comes down to perceptions because a lot of people think it's a man's world. I don't think. I do mainly men's sports.
Yeah.
Yes, there are more men that you see, in front of the screen. But behind the scenes, there are a lot of women that I have worked with. That's grown. I think that number has grown in terms of cricket producers who are women and, those sort of things. I've worked with a lot of women in star sports,
right?
actually.
I think one thing that's interesting is for both of us, we work in professions that are also really male dominated.
Yeah.
I work in production. A DT.
Is a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, which you would only think. She was one of the first few that I was like, this perception of women aren't funny. I'm like, dude, we're the funniest. We put up with the most.
Stand-up comedy is
life for us is funny.
Thank you. So well said. Yes. So well said.
Yeah.
And that's what it's been. And I get very sick when people are like, what's it like to be a woman in comedy? I'm like, it's like to be a man in comedy. It is like that only.
Yeah.
What's a day in your life like?
I still remember I started in football and I think my first real stadium experience was in what we call the Salt Lake Stadium in Calcutta, which now is seated, but it could seat like a lakh, which was one of the biggest in Asia. And I was pretty much the only girl in crew and in my 20s and this is Indian football and women football, what's going on? I remember very clearly there was no women's loo. So a huge part of my career in the beginning was me having to ask for facilities like, can we have a woman's loo that is open, that is clean? And, that perception changed with the production crew as well when they realized there are more women now coming in the workforce. So it was small things like that you wouldn't necessarily think of, which were actually the biggest struggle in the beginning. For example, if we were, traveling by road somewhere, I'm like, dude, I can't just stop anywhere.
Yeah.
You have to plan it differently. So these sort of things really change now, I feel, when you...
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why I didn't see that many women in stadium as fans and viewers as well, because the facilities just weren't there. And I think that has really changed now. That's one of the biggest things. And therefore, there are more women, I feel, in this work, your workplace as well, because these are things that are not limitations. It's just small, commonsensical things to have to keep in mind. It's maybe women in the workplace don't know how to ask for these sort of things. Listen, there's no bathroom for me.
Yeah.
It's
because you feel ashamed. I didn't have that shame. I'm like, guys, there ain't no bathroom. I ain't coming.
Teacher, may I go to toilet, please?
I mean, these are things that just had to be done. And they were very kind enough to help me along with that process. But I had to do it. I couldn't have any shame or how can I ask? And they'll know I'm going to the bathroom. No, I mean, it let me get on with my job.
Did you have really progressive parents while growing up? Did you grow up in a very open environment?
I guess now looking at things, I guess I did. You know, I mean, when I look back, I'm just like, okay, I'm the daughter of an army man and a school teacher. My grandmother, my nani, for example, lost everything in partition. At 22, she's building a life again, and she's working to put her younger brother's, education first and life first. And I started working when I was 21. Maybe that's why. Maybe that gene just carried of, and she worked till she was 80, 85.
Whoa.
My mom is still working post-retirement. So it's just, I just had those examples in my life. Now when you think about it, yes, it is progressive. Yeah. Because they managed to have children and have families and get married and still do all of it.
Did you play a lot of sports as a kid?
Yeah, I did. I wasn't great at it. Clearly that gene passed me. I was always interested in sports. I guess that was part of my dad being in the army, just encouraging that, encouraging my brother and I to take up sports. We were in the States for a bit, and that was great. I think that was a very significant period because I was just before my teen years, and school, weekend sports in America are just a different level.
Yeah.
And my brother and I got exposed to that. So we were swimming, we were playing football, we were doing tennis, we were just doing all of these sort of things about how activity and the skills that it teaches you, like getting to know other kids and team bonding and being part of a team. And, eventually these are all work-life skills when you start working in an organization that just come into play. And that's why my parents thought it was important. It's not like they're like, okay, we've got the next whatever, PT Usha or something on the line. But it was more like, look, it's exercise is important, activity is important, and they're great, bonding sort of skills that you learn. And I guess that's where the interest in sport grew. I did always have more of an interest in sport than other things. I like watching it. I was always one of the guys in school. I still am clearly one of the guys.
And when did you first get this idea into your mind about this career path?
That I didn't have at all.
Okay.
I was very happily going to go to art school and be like a graphic designer. But this happened very much by accident. There was a new channel starting and they're like, we might know someone who can do sports in front of TV, especially because it was football at that stage. It was Indian football, and they really weren't that many girls who people knew about being interested in football. They were, but not like in front of the camera. So it just worked out. It was football. It was my comfort zone. Cricket, I was like, I'm not getting involved in. No chance. Don't know the game. Don't follow it. But football, I was like, I can do this.
Yeah.
Grown up playing football, watching football. This is cool. This is easy. And that's just kind of snowballed into a career. It's amazing, actually.
The reason I started watching cricket was because of Mandira Bedi.
Of course.
I did not know about cricket. मेरे को घंटा फर्क नहीं पड़ता था. मेरे माँ बाप मतलब मेरे बाप और भाई वहाँ पे पैड लेके they are sitting there and praying for the cricket team to win. And
hey, people still do that. Okay, it's like that's what drives this.
You cannot imagine the number of times they would stop me from going to the toilet because they were like, last time to toilet पे गई थी, wicket गिरी थी.
See, it's a problem for women everywhere. Clearly.
तो मैं वहाँ पे I'm standing there, legs squeezed together because their team has to win. But it was the first time that I watched. I watched cricket because I was like, who is this woman and what is she doing? And I was just sort of fascinated with her and seeing someone like me there.
Yeah.
Did you? Like, who was your person like that?
I don't think, with all due respect to Mandira, I don't think I had that person because I wasn't interested in the sport. It wasn't that I wasn't interested in her. At that, I never grew up watching cricket, which is strange to say, right?
Yeah.
I never grew up watching cricket. So my first real experience with cricket was in about 2009 when I was asked to host forced to host a cricket tournament because
what's the story behind that?
Because it was something called the ICL, the Indian Cricket League, before IPL started, and it was with my network at the time, and they're like, कोई नहीं मिल रहा, लड़की चाहिए हमें, जाओ. Seriously, I was like, ये कुछ नहीं मालूम मुझे, ये कौन है ये लोग, ये ब्रायन लारा इंजमाम, चलो नाम तो मालूम है क्या करते हैं, कुछ नहीं मालूम. And my boss was like, देख batsman king है, bowler तो कोई देखता ही नहीं है, बस that's all you need to know. Like that was my introduction into cricket.
Oh my God.
Only later and of course when I first started in cricket, the comparisons were natural because everyone's like, are you trying to be the next Mandira? I was like, no, because what she's done is, she's still there first and foremost, by the way.
Listen, they just asked me to do this.
They just asked me to do this. She's still there. She's still rocking it. She's still killing it. She's an excellent presenter. If you listen to her, it's not just about the looks. It's the way she carries a show. She has all those skills as well, which now if you look back in those shows, you'll realize. So all the women who've come into the profession after that, of course, we will be subjected to that similar sort of, your looks are always judged. Like, ठीक है. that's a perception.
Yeah.
We understand it's a perception. We understand that there is a way that, people would like you to look on TV, but that doesn't mean you have to give into it in your personal and professional life. That's not the only thing that's going to keep you there.
Right.
Slowly, it might change, and more women will come in this industry.
For our listeners out there, if there is a young girl listening to this right now, stop listening. This is explicit. And also, and also, what are the capacities in which you have seen Indian women in sports broadcasting? Like where apart from your position, of course, what are the other places where you've worked with women?
What has changed now, I feel, is that there are more women who are what we call on-site. So obviously a lot of what we do in our studios in Bombay is in a controlled environment. It's an office.
Yeah.
It's like this.
Yeah.
And then you shift to going from venue to venue and stadiums to stadiums and, finding more women's toilets along the way and those sort of things. But that I think is what has changed a lot, especially in IPL. I think IPL really changed things because you needed many more people to suddenly start working, right? And after a while, every single team was like, okay, we want to do a little mini series on ourselves. Let's hire some people to make films on us and features on us. And all these little independent projects started going around. You needed more people in the workplace as well. You needed people who had an understanding of cricket to, let's say, before I step out and if there's a player, there's someone behind the snes who organizes that little meetup. Now, if I don't know the sport, then that person will produce me and be like, listen, these are the 3 questions. There'll be women who do that as well. I've worked with women producers who'll be like, chalo, acha, ye 3-4 questions. In the past, these are the sort of things that happen. So it's funny that we don't know actually how many women are involved behind the scenes, but I think there are quite a few.
That's great to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Mayanti, what are you doing when you're not on camera? Like when you're
chilling, dude. Clearly, things like this. Like it's the work-life balance. So I live in Bangalore, so I shuffle between 2 cities when I'm not working on camera. Making sure the rest of my house is there, playing the housewife, clearly, handling the house, the bills, the chores, the dishes, the food. We don't have a cook yet because we both travel, so poor Stuart, that's left
announced
to me.
here, Mayanti also does unpaid work.
I do.
Yeah.
Normal. I unfortunately for my husband do cook for him occasionally, which is not great. Yeah, I feel really sorry for the poor guy. He didn't know what he was getting himself into. He's like, chahiye ki nahi chahiye? Matlab, sorted. Yeah, it's that's the rest of my life. Just try and balance the rest of my life. My husband also travels a lot, so try and just meet him. We try and meet wherever we can.
In airport terminals.
Thankfully, that hasn't happened yet. It could happen. Yeah, I think that's it. You're so invested in this job, and it takes so much, and it's great. But it takes so much of. I wanted to try and have it all. I'm still trying to have it all.
Yeah.
And obviously, I have someone who's a partner who's very supportive in that, and he understands the short shelf life that you might have in this career and the kind of extremes that you have in this career. We have to be on this journey together. So understands that, okay, listen, sometimes I'm going to be away from home and you've got to handle that. And I think that's what's been helpful. And if we're talking about women who leave the workplace, maybe they don't have that. And, it's very hard. The work-life balance is really hard. I don't want to believe that you have to give up one aspect, that you have to give up on your personal life to be a great professional. I've had someone who's told me that before.
What?
And I think oftentimes women, we face this, you can be one thing, right? You can be good at being at home, but you can't be good at being at home and then also one other thing. So I think we, even as women, sometimes we have to challenge ourselves to think about, like, we can be so many of these things that overlap in beautiful little Venn diagrams.
No, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I pretty much still struggle.
What was it like the first time you walked into one of those massive stadiums?
Yeah, that's the funny part. I don't ever think it's not a profession I wanted, right? But I never really got overawed or scared or overwhelmed. Or starstruck, for that matter, which is what I think has really helped me. Because you meet so many incredible personalities and you're interviewing absolute legends at times. And sometimes it'll be like Bollywood stars will also come or just stars from other. And I think that really helped because you could just get along with the job. So I don't ever remember really being taken back or overwhelmed. But there's certain situations Wankhede is one.
Whoa.
The stadium here.
Yeah.
Where if you're doing a
Coming into this
game,
podcast?
you're just, oh, this is terrifying. That's why I came in early, because I was just like, I'll gather my thoughts, calm myself down.
But that's Mayanti. She'll come early for anything and she will do it really well.
I better do it now after this podcast. Otherwise, but
You
no,
were
I
saying.
just don't think I had it. So sorry, no tips there.
No,
Just
that's
don't
good.
think I had it, yeah.
Yeah. What about Aditi, when you first did your first time coming into like a crowded theater? What did that feel like?
I don't remember it.
It's so traumatic, you blanked it out.
Yeah. In fact, I would love to recount this for my general humiliation. I did my first open mic. I did an open mic audition, nailed it. Okay, and I had this series of jokes about how my father is a Punjabi, and so he does not say. He can't say bears, he says beards. and that changes the meaning, the entire story of Goldilocks and the three beards, because Goldilocks pitta na beards, so that is why she went and slept in the bed of the bears, because wo thaki hui thi, drunk thi. So now I have written this into a fantastic story. I'm like, Arey Aditi, I go for the open mic audition, nailed it. Okay, come out too confident. I get a call from the owner of the club. Like, as soon as I'm walking out, he's like, we have a show tonight, and it is a corporate show for the Young Beep organization. I get on stage, and then I don't remember what happened. I remember starting my joke, and then somebody in the front row started talking to me. And because I was I had done stand-up for 40 minutes before that, so it's not even like a super experience. So he starts talking, I start becoming what I think is a stand-up comedian should say. So I'm like, sir, nice Hawaiian shirt. He looks at me, he's like, to joke bolna.
Oh man, that's
I don't remember what happened after that.
man, that's tough.
I do not remember what happened after that. I think I said, sorry sir, and I go to toilet and I left. Like,
1,000 apologies, sir. यहाँ bathroom है क्या? लड़कियों के लिए है क्या? Oh man.
1,000 apologies. And I fucked off so hard.
Yeah.
That I did that now I'm a stand-up comedian. The trauma took me so long.
Man,
That
is
was my first time and it was horrifying.
That is tough. Yeah, see, I don't see the audience, right? You gotta remember
That's
that.
true.
You're just seeing the camera and it's like how three of us are talking here. It's such a fun environment to work in, you know. So it's that fear factor isn't there. Yeah, it's a live TV. You make a mistake, you can try and cover it up, or you can move along. I mean, that's just, I think that's one way to look at it. Yeah.
You know, the place that you do, I think, especially our generation has the burden and the pleasure of interacting with people online.
I don't do it though. Look, both my husband and I turned off our comments on Instagram.
Oh.
We just
Nice.
made it, and it's kind of actually lost us endorsements where people were like, no, we want you
crowd
to
audience interaction. and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I do have a serious problem with social media because I think we're encouraging bullies, which is not okay in normal life. So it shouldn't be okay in, on
Online,
social
yeah,
media.
yeah.
And it is again bullies who you won't necessarily meet in face to face.
Yeah, who would never say that shit to
would
your
never
face.
say it.
Yeah, I mean, till today, I haven't really met anyone who's done that. I think it was so important to cut out the negativity. Also, that's not the only thing that's going to give me validation.
Yeah.
So it's maybe because to some extent, my profession still doesn't totally depend on social media and interactions, and the results of what I do don't necessarily depend on that. Maybe that's why I can step away from it. I don't think everyone can in this industry. Can you?
No, I don't. Now I've become immune. Like now,
have to be immune,
the things
yeah.
I've read and heard about myself, I'm like, who is this person? Like, I don't want to be her. Like, she sounds a lot more fascinating than me.
Yeah, exactly. And the best of the theories that people have about my marriage, you're like, dude, they must really think we're like some very like ultra level smart people to conspire that you're just normal people. Yeah.
This is one thing. Like, we were looking at was the fact that whenever like Anushka Sharma and Virat Kohli are out there, Anushka Sharma gets harassed, straight up
seriously.
harassed when Virat Kohli is, I don't know, sneezing too hard, right? उनका पता नहीं standard ही क्या है. with you and Stuart, it's not been as sort of
sometimes it's been bad,
brutal.
but you're right. Yeah.
Because I love every time that someone says something, you put out a picture of you and Stuart. You're like,
Yeah.
yellow, yeah.
I haven't done that in a while. I should.
Kar do,
Waiting
kar
for
do.
the next opportunity.
Kar do. Just do it. Be like responding to the trolls. It doesn't even matter if there are none. Yeah, what if you all fought damn badly and then she goes and she's damn happy on screen. She's like, ye to badi khush hai. Yahan pe to jhagad ke gayi hai.
But we made small rules. We're like, okay, before a game, before a show, we're just not going to be those people. It's because he has to be in the zone, and so that was great. That was one thing that we really respected about each other's professions. Listen, every couple is going to have some argument or the other about things, but before a game, it was always like every morning, best of luck, and before a show, you always wish we just give each other that space before that because we understand. Again, your bad day, if it translates onto the field or if it translates in the studio, you're gone. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, you know what? I really like the idea of this. Like, what is, to the guys, to all the men listening to this podcast, that's about my dad. What is the...
His beer.
Yeah. What is the advice you would give to, maybe tell us something that your partner has done for you that, like this is wonderful that you all decide to give each other space before a game or a show.
We understand that you want to keep us safe and secure and protected from the world. TK, it's a good thing. You would want to do that for anyone that you love.
Yeah.
But be a little open-minded.
Yeah.
You would have had to do the same thing in your own profession. So she has to do this. She has to find that same balance as well.
We're asking everybody who comes on the podcast if there's one thing that listeners can do to make workplaces more friendly for women. So our listeners include probably mostly women and Aditi's dad.
Yeah.
My
mom also now after this, okay? She watches every show to see what earrings I'm wearing. Okay, so Mama, I know you're also listening to this.
Their hoops, auntie, they are very pretty. बहुत सज रही है आपकी लड़की यहाँ पे.
I think we just come back to the basics, the conversations. I think things like, look, what a woman goes through sometimes is very natural. So, things like even menstruation and things like that. These are things that are they don't affect your work, but it's something you have to deal with on a daily basis.
That has to be accommodated.
Yeah, so you just have to understand sometimes that they'll be like, okay, I can't take a weekend trip or I can't do these sort of things. So I think a woman should have a space where she's allowed to have these conversations, and also conversations about consent. About if you're comfortable in a place or not comfortable in a place. Women who choose to have children, who will be pregnant in the workplace. Got to eat your meals on time. You got to sometimes take, these sort of things that is going to happen. Those are things that would be great if women just felt that they had the confidence to say that, listen, this is what I need right now. It does not make me any less valid as a worker or as a professional or bad at my job. It's just something I'm going through, which you're not going to go through, dude. You just got to understand.
Thank you so much for coming by, Mayanti. This was so much fun.
And thank you. It was a lot of fun. Great to have these conversations, actually. I think they're very important.
Women in Labor is made by Christina McGilvery, Laura Quinn, Aditi Mittal, Manya Sachdeva, Sonakshi Chowdhury, Nandita Gupta, Sonali Thakur, Ipti Patnaik, Rose Higgins, Porva Jassi, Regina Hawkins, Kashish Sethi, and Priyanka Verma. This podcast is generously supported by a grant from the American Center, New Delhi. The opinions, findings, and conclusions stated are those of Women in Labor and do not necessarily reflect those of the United States Department of State. For more information on the podcast, visit womeninlabor.com or search Women in Labor on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.